So, good morning, everyone. We are just getting ourselves organized. Nicola and I had a bit of a confusion about time zones and days of the week and stuff. So thank you, Nicola. It is 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock at night in the UK now. So we're very appreciative of you coming to chat to us at this unearthly hour. I'm going to introduce Nicola, and then Nicola, have you got slides that you want to share, or do you want us to share your slides for you?
No, I've got the slides. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Oh, right, good. No,
okay.
I've got the slides. Unfortunately, what I haven't got is my films, because of course, Sunday at 11 o'clock is 24 hours from now. So I had been planning to sort all of my films out tomorrow, but I have got a talk, and I can you know, have discussion and share ideas and things with you. So I hope that that's going to be okay.
That's going to be fine. All right, so you get yourself organized. I'm going to introduce you. Okay, so I have Nicola, as many of you will know, is one of the long-standing members of the Keyword Sign practical and research community. And when I was at university, Nicola taught me, and she came along with another guy whose name I think was Mark, but I could be wrong. And they showed us AAC devices that in those days were really, really, really basic. And I remember it vividly, and I don't remember much vividly from that period of my life. So anyway, so Nicola is, she's got over 40 years experience working with children and adults with intellectual disabilities, long-standing member of ISAC. She did just about the first research paper, I think, about Makaton in the UK. And her doctoral research explored the language skills of children using Keyword Sign. With Kaiser Lonanen, she edited the first textbook on manual sign acquisition, which was in 2019, and features chapters by our very own Leah, Libby, and Karen. And she's the founder of Open Storytellers, a company of people with learning disabilities. And her main work now is about self-advocates developing personal stories and researching world legends that feature disability. So if you are all ready to go, Nicola, over to you.
Right. Can I share the screen? Have I got screen sharing?
Yes, so at the top corner of your screen, there's an up arrow. Sorry, we're in Teams, everybody, not Zoom. So
there's a top. Oh, I see. Open share tray. Okay. Let me just try and find my presentation. So you'll have to bear with me, colleagues.
That's okay.
Okay.
Can you
see the presentation?
We can. Can you press present so that we can see it in present? But at the moment, we can see it in what you can see. If you click present, does that work?
Press play.
Press play.
Okay. Can you see that?
Nicola, did you share just one window? Did you just share your the one window? So just stop
play as in slideshow.
Yes.
Yeah.
So what can you see at the moment? I can't see myself, which is a problem. Can you see the presentation?
Okay. I'm just going to request control of your screen, Nicola. If you give me control, let me see if I can do it for you.
I think that's the most sensible thing to do.
I have an instinct that you're going to have to stop sharing and start sharing again. We've tried this with the Keynote.
Okay, so if what you do is you stop sharing and then you play your PowerPoint presentation as if you were on your computer live and then share again, we think that will work.
Okay.
It's not like,
I can't see how to stop sharing here. It doesn't give me.
Open your Teams again, and then you'll see all of us, and there's a box with a cross in it, and that'll stop sharing.
Where it says people waiting in the lobby.
No, down.
I like that. Sorry, guys. It's a nightmare. Do you know what? I think what I might do is just I think what I might do is just talk to you, and then I will send the slides over, and then they can be shared with people. I think that's
we can see your slides. Yep. Okay.
No, I've stopped that now.
Okay.
Hey, okay. Now we can try share again if you want.
Where do we do that?
So back up the top where there's the rectangle box with the up arrow. You click there, and then there's an option that says desktop, and then there's a picture of us.
No,
okay. Let me try. I've got a draft
version
of your slides. Let me see if I can share those. At least that will give us something. Okay.
Can you see that now?
Yeah, that'll be fine.
Okay.
Yep.
Right. So what this talk is about is how we can learn from kids who sign, and through having real conversations with them. And in the session, I want to talk a bit about the background to my research and some very kind of simple questions that have motivated all the research that I've done. And those are questions about what exactly is keyword signing and what might we expect from signing children? Who are the kids who sign? How much do they sign? What do they use signs for? And how far do they get with their signing skills? Now, I originally had some films to show you, which aren't on this computer because I was going to get them tomorrow. So what I'm going to have to do is go through the presentation, and then I'm going to come out and I'm going to do a bit of demonstration for you. So I'm sorry it's not going to be quite as slick as it should be. So the questions that I've always had, I worked for the Makaton project for 10 years, and I read a lot of research at that time, but this was back in the 1970s, 80s, about the time when sign language research was just starting. And I was incredibly grateful to Makaton because they sent me off to all of these sign language conferences where I learned a huge amount about sign linguistics, which turned out to be quite important for the research that I was doing. But I've always been really interested in, well, what are kids actually doing? I'm not so interested in what goes on kind of, you know, in laboratories. And I mean, that's all very interesting, trying to find out what is the easiest way to teach kids signs and things like that. I'm interested in what do kids do? And those simple questions, actually, it turns out you have to do a bit of kind of unpacking before you can really understand what you're looking at when you watch these children. I'm hoping that makes sense. So thinking about keyword signing, let's think first of all about sign language. So sign language, as we know, is the cultural language of the deaf community. It does not use spoken words, but it has a grammar. And it's a grammar of a spatial language. So what you see young people doing who sign is that they will change the form of a sign like walk. They will change the way that they sign that to show how somebody walks, walking down, walking around. And that looks like natural gesture, but actually it's rule governed, it's part of the language. You'll see why I'm talking about that in a bit. Keyword signing, what happens, as we know, is that we use the vocabulary from a sign language and we pair that with speech. And we can do that in many different ways. So you can use just one sign. So you might be signing something like, we went for a walk and saw a dog, and you might just sign, you might say that and you might sign dog, or you might actually sign the words walk and saw and dog. And whether you do that, whether you use one sign or many signs as you're talking, depends on a lot of different things. One being how much you think the child understands, another being how fluent your own signing is and how confident you feel and how much you're seeing signing around you. So what we know is that, first of all, we wouldn't expect to see children using a sign language if all they've been watching and observing is people using just the odd sign as they talk. And secondly, we know that teachers and parents as well vary in the amount of signs they're going to be using to these kids who sign. So those are two quite important things to be thinking about. Now, who the kids are is also really important, because you know, you parents, that your children are individuals, and that how much they sign or how they sign is affected by a lot of different things, like what kind of special needs they have, whether they've got mild intellectual difficulties or profound intellectual difficulties, if they've got autism, physical disabilities. We mustn't forget that actually there are a lot of youngsters who are deaf and who could be sign language users, whose signing will look pretty much like keyword signing, because they will also have intellectual impairments and autism. And we know now much more than we used to about the kinds of difficulties that some deaf children have. They have additional needs. And they're not a totally separate group as we used to think. And of course, people, the kids who are signing have different levels of communication skills, and there's going to be different levels of signing to them, depending on how good their teachers are. I have to say that most of my research has been done in schools rather than with families, so you'll kind of have to bear with me. So my research, and again, it took place quite a long time ago, but I think the findings are still pretty relevant. Well, it's up to you whether you think they're relevant or not. But the questions that I had in my earliest research were, okay, so we're teaching kids these signs in school, but how do they use them? And how does staff use signs? And then the second questions came from my PhD, 1990 to 95, which was really looking at what are the language skills of these kids. As Andy mentioned, all of this research is, and more recent research is covered in this book that was published in 2019 and thankfully is available now in paperback. Now, who are these signers in special schools? Now, I'm not sure how good this slide is for you to look at, but basically, when I was looking at these 49 kids in 12 London special schools, and I watched them in classrooms, and then I watched them in free play with their friends. And what I found was that of those 49 kids, they were all, of course, very different. But there were some kids who seemed to be, they really needed to use signing because they did speak, but so much of their speech was unintelligible that most of their effective communication was through sign. But on the other end of the continuum, there were youngsters who were only using signs occasionally because their speech could be understood. If they weren't understood, they would use signs. So they were kind of using sign as a backup. So this question about, well, how much a youngster's signing is going to depend very much on how much they need to use sign and how much they are sensitive to the signing that's going on around them and the kind of context that they're in, if that makes sense. So the first kind of message really from that research was, first of all, that it was very, very obvious from watching these children that kids signed more when signs are used to them. And that was the case even for kids who were really very, pretty good signers and who really obviously enjoyed using signs. Their signs would drop off if they were with teachers who didn't sign to them. Good signing with their friends really was only happening in the schools that valued and promoted signing. And the kind of tip that I wanted to pass on for families is that it matters that you sign to these youngsters, but of course, it's perfectly understandable. There's so many pressures on families, speech therapists and teachers always saying, oh, do this, do that. And you may find that it's very difficult to keep up your level of signing. But I think, although there's no research on this, it's probably the modality that counts. So you may only have a few signs, but as long as you're using natural gestures a lot, and the kids are really seeing gesture and sign being used by you in real communication, that's the kind of models that they need. And it can take time. And the second point I wanted to make was that it's important to sign where kids can see you. Now, I'm going to stop the presentation now and just kind of take a few questions or have a little bit of discussion about that first point. So how do I stop this? Are we here?
I can stop sharing for you, no worries.
Yeah. Okay. Right. So I'm just hoping that that made sense. And has anybody got any questions about that? So the main thing was that watching these 49 kids, they varied in the extent that they used sign, they varied in the extent that they needed to use sign, and all of your kids are individuals, and that will be the case for them. But for all of these kids, it mattered very much, and future research that has been done by Ellen Romberts, which is written up in the book, which is quite recent. And one of my master's students did an in-depth research looking at teachers who use sign and then dropped signing to see what happened. These kids they're not stupid, right? So if we're teaching them signs and we're expecting them to use signs, but they don't see their own mode of communication being valued and used around them, then they will drop it. They won't use it as much. But my takeaway message is that it's really the modality, I think, that matters. That's my own feeling. As I say, there's no research about it. So if you've only got a few signs, parents, don't worry, just use them, but use a lot of natural gesture as well. The real point about these findings about sign where the kids can see you is a very important one that comes from deaf families. So because when we speak to children, so a child who's playing with a toy, who's drawing, right, and they're intent on the drawing, if we're speaking to them, they can hear what we're saying as they focus on their play or the drawing that they're doing. If they're signers, they can't see you signing if they're drawing at the same time. I know this seems very obvious, but it's actually not. And often what you see, and what we know that hearing parents will do, is that they will try and get the child's attention away. So the child is doing a drawing and you're saying, oh, that's a lovely house you're doing there. The kid can't see you. So you turn their face towards you so that you can then say, oh, that's a lovely house you did. The trouble is they're no longer looking at the house, so they don't know that your sign refers to what they were doing. Does that make sense? What deaf mothers do is that instead of taking, the child and getting their attention away, that's right, it's my clock, which you will hear, they move their sign down into the child's signing space. So the child is drawing like this, and they will go, that's a great house, good, in the child's signing space. And that way, by moving your sign towards the child's focus of attention, the child then sees what you're talking about and the sign at the same time. And that is a really, really important tip for families, because it's very easy to just be signing and the kid's not looking at you. Any questions about that?
So we're just going to ask attendees, if you have a question, just raise your hand with the reaction and then we'll ask you to unmute.
Okay, I'm gonna, while people are putting their hands, so on the reaction button, put your hand up if you want to ask a question, but I'm gonna make a comment really, Nicola, which is, and presumably that's really hard to do with a device that speaks, because you'd have to move the device into their space where they were looking as well as drawing. Does that make sense?
Oh, devices are totally different. I'm not talking about devices, and I wouldn't, I'm only talking about sign and gesture here, right? So if you want to talk about AAC technical devices, then we've got a whole presentation about that actually done by a parent. But that's a different kettle of fish. I'm talking here about kids who sign, so it's keyword signers. Yeah.
Like we have no questions, and that made sense to everybody.
Good. Okay. So the next thing I'm going to talk about, and I'm not going to go, but I think I'm not going to go back to the presentation actually, because I just think what I want to be able to do is to show you with signing.
Yeah.
And then I'll just send the presentation. So the next thing I was looking at all of those years ago was to say, okay, we've taught these kids these vocabularies, right? What do they do with it when they're signing, sitting in a classroom? At that time, I hold my hand up to this completely. As speech therapists, the way that we largely taught signs is that we would, I'm looking for an object here. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm just going to have to keep using this pen. We would hold up an object or a picture and we would go, what's this? And then the child would go, if we were lucky, pen. Oh, very good. Yes, it's a pen, right? That was the way that we taught signing. Okay. What is the child doing when we do that? It's labeling, it's naming, okay? Now, it's very important to be able to name things, but if all you can do is just point and name things, you're not going to get very far in communication. What do we need to do in communication with the language that we've got? Well, we need to be able to do all sorts of things. We need to be able to ask for things. Speech therapists are always going on about requests. I'll talk about that in a minute. We need to be able to tell other people what to do. We need to be able to call them when we need them. We need to be able to argue. We need to be able to protest. We need to be able to tease and joke and imagine and play. And we need, you won't be surprised to hear, we need to be able to tell stories, right? So what were these 49 children doing with the signs they'd got? Well, I watched them and I coded what they were doing when they were in the classroom with their teachers, and then when they were in free play with their peers. And when they were in the class with their teachers, I will just have to check what they were doing, but mostly what they were doing was naming or describing. So a describing thing would be something like saying, you know, if I say what color is this, and they say red, that goes down as a description. So that was very much in this kind of watch this thing. With their peer group, they actually used rather more different functions than they did in the classroom with teachers. Oh, the other thing they did with teachers was just to go yes, no, right? So they have much more limited use of language in the classrooms than they did with the peer group. But even so, that was quite kind of limited what they were doing. That was 40 years ago, and I don't know how much that's changed now. But again, it's an interesting thing that if you look at the research, particularly in Isaac, there's very little interest or focus on what kids are actually doing with their language skills. And I'm interested to know from you parents, how are your kids using their keyword signs? Do they ask for things? Do they use their signs to tell you what they've done? Do they use their signs to argue and discuss and challenge you and ask you questions? Any volunteers?
Liz, Dove, do you want to unmute yourself and let us know what you think?
Hi. I am a parent of a child that uses keyword sign as part of his communication, and he mostly uses it to request food. He is very, very food motivated, very good at getting his needs met. Not so much with that back and forth of communication, you know, how was your day? I don't get a lot of that, but definitely uses it to get his physical needs met.
Yeah.
Awesome. Leah, do you want to weigh in?
Yeah, sure. Yes, with my daughter who's now 4, some of her earlier signs were actually about making other people do things. So we used to get a lot of the stop, you know, and then once she learnt, you know, wait there, we'd be told to wait because she was going to go and do something. And we're getting a lot of, I'm just doing it one more time, and we get the face, you know, wait for me to sort of direct, you know, my behavior and your behavior, which is actually really lovely because I can see her gaining more control, you know, over what she does and what she gets other people to do. So I'm hoping that the commenting and sort of telling stories about her day will start to come, but her confidence with using sign to act on her environment is really coming through, which I'm loving. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Can we get one more from Anne Tucker?
Hi, Nicola. Really interested to hear. I'm not a parent, but a comment. The best signers, communicative signers that I've had been where I had 2 really good signers. They were adolescent boys, developed from a class teacher and a TA who signed all the time. And they used their signs with each other playfully, communicatively, for a broad range of contexts. They hadn't been exposed to sign language, but they used it in a sign language way in generalizing it across circumstances and functions. But I haven't seen that as much as before, you know, and now I'm seeing a lot of stilted communication, except in a classroom where I have a teacher from sign language background, and he signs all the time, and the children are starting to sign more communicatively. But I agree with what you're saying, that the models are so important, but also having, as I said, a mate. They were mates and they were communicating all the time with each other.
Yeah, Absolutely. So I'm very interested in, I'm sorry, I'm not very good at names, but whoever it was who was saying that children's use is often quite restricted. And that, I mean, that would go whether or not they were signing. I mean, if they were speaking, it might be the same as well. So sometimes some youngsters, their communication starts off, it is quite narrow. It's quite focused on one particular area. And the question then is, how do you broaden that? How do you move that and kind of shift him off just asking for food? Leia's example of her little girl saying things like stop, that's really, really good, because if you can get your child, children love telling other people what to do. So doing things like, I don't know, or even saying, does he say no if you give him food that he doesn't want?
Yes, my son will say no, thank you, if he's offered a food that is undesirable.
Right, okay. And suppose you offer him only a tiny, tiny little bit of food when really he'd like a lot.
He's very good at asking for more.
So he'll do more.
Yeah.
Okay.
He will do more. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So we haven't really got time. I'm going to go on to talking about stories in a bit, which may be a way of, is a way that I've found of broadening it. But that whole thing. So he may be only asking for food, but you're already telling me that he's doing a little bit more than that, because he is protesting and rejecting, and he is telling you things. He's saying more. Yeah. And if you were to take the food and start putting it away, I mean, getting him saying stop more would again be, it's just a tiny little extension, but that's actually very important. So already, if we really look closely at what your son is doing, he's doing a little bit more than just asking for food, which is great. And as he gets older, maybe we can extend that a little bit more. So, okay, that was kind of where I left it in 1980, that teachers needed to use signs. And by the way, what was the best thing for teachers is if they were in a school which had really good signing policies and where the head teacher was committed to signing. In those schools where the head wasn't a good signer and there wasn't a kind of policy in the school about signing, you would get the odd good teacher who used signs a lot in her classroom, but then the kid would leave that class, move on to another one where a teacher wouldn't be signing. So actually getting that policy in the school, getting the senior management team behind it is critically important to put pressure on them to do that. Sometimes teachers in interviews said to me, oh, well, I would sign, but, I'm just not very good with my hands. I always remember one teacher saying that. In the schools, in the 3 schools where the head teachers were really on it, no teacher would have dared say that. They knew it was their job to sign. Anyway, I will just leave you with that thought. Right, so I then went off and I was a speech therapist in a special school. And I was doing a lot with signs, obviously. And I was sitting in the staff room, and one of my friends, a teacher, was doing one of these checklists on the kids. And she said, she lifted her head, she went, Nicola, she said, I know Jayesh put signs together, but would you say he was using sentences? And I said, that's a really interesting question. And the answer is, I've got no idea. So I went off and did a PhD for 4 years to find out, are kids who put signs together, are they using sentences? It sounds like a simple question, and it's not a simple question at all. And I haven't got the time to go into telling you everything that I found. So I'm just going to share a couple of findings with you. The first thing I had to do was to find out, well, how many kids, if I want to look at kids who are joining signs, how do I find them? So I did a survey of 126 schools in London and the southeast of England. 100 of them responded. Of those 100, I think only about half said that they had kids who could join signs or could do a sign and a point, because I asked about that as well. And there were very, very few schools, let me just check, who had more than one child putting signs together. So that was quite, it was, if you like, it was a tiny bit scary, really. Oh my God, there's hardly any kids putting signs together. Why is this? Well, if you remember back, though, to what I was saying, yeah, there were 2 schools with 3 children putting signs together, and 10 schools with 2 children, and there was 1 with 5 and 1 with 7. So obviously something interesting was going on here, and I suspect it was to do again with the signing culture in the school, but I couldn't find that out. But if you remember what I was saying originally in that slide, of course, if you've got kids who are talking and they're only using signs as backup, then they're not going to be joining signs together. So the ones that worry us are the kids who really need to use signs for effective communication, where their speech is pretty unintelligible and they're only using single signs, because we really want them to be doing more than that with their signing. Anyway, I eventually found 10 kids who could do the research tasks that I was wanting. That was things like picture description and being able to watch a little film and tell it back, and who were happy to engage with a new person. So obviously you have to kind of check on things like that. And then I did a lot of investigation of their signing skills. So when they put signs together, what were they doing? And of those children, there were 6 of them who talked, and 4 of them who were really non-verbal. Oh, I can see a dog. Hello, dog. I think the kid with the who did the longest signs, strings, if you like, could do about 9 signs at a time. Most of them did sort of two sign phrases. But they were capable of joining a lot of signs together. Now, the tasks, and I think this is actually important, because if you want to really look at what kids are doing with signs, you need to give them tasks that are interesting and motivating. And it is no good just holding up a picture, which is, again, what speech therapists in my day, I'm sure you're all very different now, but what we used to do is have a nice picture and we'd hold it up and say, tell me about this picture. I haven't even got a picture because I'm in my kitchen, so I haven't got any of the props that I was going to have. But anyway, now the problem with holding up a picture and saying to the child, tell me about this picture, is that, again, these kids aren't stupid, right? They know that you can see the picture that you're asking about. So they're going to give you minimal information, because that is what is pragmatically appropriate in a conversation to do. Unless, of course, they're very autistic, in which case they will happily go on and on and on and on and on and on at length about what is in the picture that you can already see. But most of these signing kids, they can see it's there, so they'll give you minimal information. So that's not a good context for language. The other reason that pictures are not very good for signing, and we know this from research with deaf kids, is that they encourage naming. So kids will point to things and give you their names, but they won't use their signs dynamically. And the best way of getting really dynamic, creative sign out of children that I've found, and that they found with deaf kids as well, is to show them film, because in film there's movement, and sign is a moving language. So what I did is that I got my son and daughter to enact a little story on film called Spider Sandwich, where my son sat and watched the television, and my daughter came in with some food items, and it was all mimed, put them on a tray, and then sat down next to him with a cake, and then he would hold his hand out and she would have to give him the cake. Now, all of these items were chosen because I knew about sign language and the way that sign language grammar works, so that if you wanted to show giving a cake, you could do give cake like that, or you could change your handshake from give like that to give like that. Do you understand what I mean? Because I was interested to see how creatively the children use signs. This was because I had actually seen kids modifying signs in the way that deaf children did. And lo and behold, that is exactly what they did. What I then did is that they watched the film. It was only 3 minutes long. And then I positioned a teacher right outside and hauled them in and said, okay, now you tell her, or she would say, tell me about the film you've just seen. Why did I do that? Because when children are narrating, they will narrate more expansively, and they will tell you more if they know you have not seen or you were not part of the experience. So that is a really, really important tip for teachers and for parents, is that you have to create situations where children are motivated to tell you things or tell people things that people do not know. Because if they know that you know, they won't give you the information. That thing about what did you do at school today? I mean, that is just, I will just say, I can remember asking my granddaughter this, what did you do at school today? Nothing, she goes. I mean, it's just, everybody does that. It's not just kids with learning difficulties. What did you do at school today, Adelaide? Nothing. Do you know what they'd done at school? They had a handler in with snakes. And the children had been handling snakes in school. What do you mean, Adelaide? You didn't do anything. You did nothing in school today. You were holding snakes and spiders. Oh, that. Right. Anyway, so what did these kids do then? Well, what I found was that they did change handshapes and movements in exactly the way that deaf children do with their signing. Now, they weren't using sign language as such, okay? So they would do things like, instead of give cake, they would actually change the handshake to show giving a cake, giving a sweet. And this was something that they never saw their teachers doing, okay? They were creatively doing this for themselves. Why were they doing it? I think it's because they had a very clear image in their mind from the story that they'd seen on the film, and they were motivated to tell that to the teacher because it was an interesting and funny story that they wanted to share. The second context that I had for filming was that I simply sat them down with their teacher and said, tell me about something that's happened. And this is really how I got into storytelling and story sharing with these kids. Tell me about something that's happened to you recently. And again, I'm the naive listener. I don't know. So the teacher says, oh, let's tell her about what happened in the playground. Tell her about when you went to see the aeroplane. And these kids would do these modifications of signs as they were telling me about events in their own lives. And the most dramatic one I've got, which I have on film, but of course I'm unable to show you, but it was a very dyspraxic kid, very dyspraxic. So, very unintelligible and with severe learning difficulties and not a huge vocabulary. And he was talking, he was obsessed with planes, okay? So he was telling me about planes. And then his teacher said, tell her about going to see Concorde. What did you see? And he went like, so he took the sign for light. And I knew that his normal sign for light was this because he'd made it. I'd seen him make it earlier. And he went like this. Okay. And she picked up on it. And she said, yes, the lights, plural, were flashing. He has one sign, light. What does he do? He doubles it to show plural, and he does flash on and off. Now, you may say, okay, but he's just representing an image he's got in his head. But that's it, precisely. He's able to do that in the medium of sign. And that means that he is communicating much more than just the word light. The teachers never did this. I never saw a single modification by a teacher. This was something the kids invented, well, found out for themselves, a principle of language, how you can change your language form to be more specific. And it was really beautiful to see. And in a subsequent project with one of my master's students, we found that you could actually teach children to use these sign modifications. So, for example, if you take a sign like walk, right, and they can do walk up, you can actually get them also to do fly up and fly down. So walk up, walk down. So you could get them to generalize that modification across different verbs, which is really exciting. That, you know, children really can develop their signing skills. The question is, how do you do it? So I'm going to stop there again and say, has anybody seen their kids doing anything like this? Because actually, it's much more common than you might think. And I'm just wondering if anybody's seen their kids doing anything like this.
Okay, so we've got Anne Tucker has a hand up. Would you like to speak, Anne?
And Tanya and Rebecca have as well, I can see.
Yeah. All right, let's go to Rebecca first.
This is lovely to listen to, Nicola. Thank you so much. I'm a speech pathologist, not a parent. But I remember years and years ago, a wonderful kid who, I think it's fair to say, fitness was not his priority. And they dragged him out for a bike ride. And the way he signed bike has never, or cycling, has never left me, because he put all of this drama into it. And it was uphill. And it was just the most beautiful evocation of what he'd been through on this hot summer's day on his bike. It was lovely.
Yeah, that's a sign modification. That's language in action.
Tanya?
Hi, I'm a parent. I've got a son, Kobe, that's now 15 years of age. But when he was actually signing, he didn't talk until he was 7 years of age, or 6. And he would sign, he would have no speech, and he would put 7 words together, or 7, I always said sentences as well, back then when he was 6 years of age. And he'd put like 7 signs together and always had a sentence. I'd always call it a sentence that he was trying to actually also say. But he would also adapt his signs when he wanted to go shopping, and he would sign the word cold. And his sign for cold meant he wanted to go to Coles. And Coles is a shopping centre that we have here in Australia. And then when he saw that his Poppy or someone was actually doing writing, like actually with a pen on paper, he would actually sign writing, because he would actually hear the word writing. And so when I actually saw him do sign for writing, it's not that he wanted to go writing, like you could see that people were doing writing. So this is sort of like, I've got to actually understand exactly what he's so visually looking at and what he's processing as well. But yeah, that was quite interesting how he's adapting those signs to express himself.
Yeah, absolutely. So he's hearing, I mean, the point is that what he's doing is he's hearing the word and he's translating that into the nearest equivalent of what he knows the sign is. Yeah, I mean, I think when if we really look at what the kids are doing, it just teaches us so much. So actually encouraging this creative use of sign and gesture is so important. And what are the ways that you can do that? Well, I've got a whole load of kind of sign games that I do. Sorry, it's now going to...
And your clock is ticking at the perfect time, because we're actually at time, which means we're going to have to wind up and go into, because we've got more sessions starting. So at this point, I just want to say thank you so much, Nicola. I actually think you talking and getting engagement from people was almost better than your slides, but thank you so much for being willing, and at the late at night and across the world. We're very, very appreciative to have had your input. So thank you very much. And yes, we can do some clapping of one sort or another. Yes.
That's a great pleasure. What I will do is that I will send you the slides, and I'll also send a handout, because how I got into, kids telling stories is my work on story sharing, and you can find out all about that on free courses on the internet. So have a wonderful day. Thank you so much for your lovely questions and sharing the information about the children. I've loved being with you, and I will send you some stuff to circulate around. So I'm only sorry you didn't get to see the films, but there we go. Okay, bye-bye now.
Thank you so much, Nicola. Bye.